Elena Vasquez was 32 years old the first time she touched a piano. Most people who play at concert halls around the world start when they are 4 or 5. Their parents put them in lessons. They practice for hours every day. They go to special schools. They have teachers who guide their hands and correct their mistakes. Elena had none of that. She grew up in a tiny village in rural Mexico, the kind of place where the roads turned to mud when it rained, and the nearest doctor was 2 hours away by bus. Her family worked the land. Her father woke before the sun to tend the fields. Her mother sold vegetables at the market in town. Music existed in their lives, but only in small ways. The church choir on Sundays. The old radio that sometimes picked up a signal, her grandmother humming while she cooked beans over a fire. There was no piano in the village. There was no music teacher. There was barely enough money for food and shoes that fit. Dreams about playing beautiful instruments were not something people like Elena were allowed to have. At least, that is what everyone believed. When Elena was 25, she made a difficult choice. She left her village, her family, and everything she knew. She traveled north to the United States, looking for work, looking for a chance at something more. She ended up in Chicago, a city of tall buildings and cold winters, and more people than she had ever seen in her life. She found a job as a cleaning woman. The pay was low, but it was honest work. She cleaned offices during the day and took extra shifts at night to send money back home. One of her night jobs was at a place called the Hartwell Concert Hall. It was a grand old building with velvet seats and golden lights, and a stage where famous musicians performed for crowds in fancy clothes. Elena mopped the floors. She wiped down the seats. She emptied the trash cans and cleaned the bathrooms. She was invisible to the people who came to watch the shows. They walked past her without seeing her, their eyes fixed on the stage, on the music, on a world she was not part of. But Elena saw everything. She saw the way the musicians moved their fingers across their instruments. She saw the way they closed their eyes when they played, like they had gone somewhere else entirely. She heard the music echo through the empty hall after everyone had left. And something about it made her heart ache in a way she could not explain. The piano sat in the lobby. It was a beautiful instrument, black and shiny, with keys that looked like they were made of ivory and night. It was there for decoration mostly, though sometimes a performer would play a few notes before a show to warm up. Elena walked past it every night, on her way in and out. She never thought about touching it. Pianos were for other people, not for women like her. Then one night, everything changed. It was late, past midnight. The concert had ended hours ago. Everyone had gone home. Elena was alone in the building, finishing her work. She was tired. Her back hurt. Her hands were rough from the cleaning chemicals. She was thinking about her mother, about the village, about all the things she had left behind. She passed the piano on her way to get her mop bucket, and for some reason she still cannot explain, she stopped. She looked at it, really looked at it. The keys seemed to glow under the soft light of the lobby. They seemed to be waiting for something. Elena looked around. There was no one there, no one to see, no one to laugh at her. She sat down on the bench. Her heart was beating fast, like she was doing something wrong. She lifted her hand, her rough and tired hand, and pressed a single key. The note rang out, clear and pure. It filled the empty lobby and seemed to hang in the air like a living thing. Elena felt something move inside her chest. It was like a door opening, a door she never knew was there. She pressed another key, then another. The sounds did not make a song. They were just random notes, clumsy and disconnected. But to Elena, they were the most beautiful things she had ever heard, because she was the one making them. That night, she did not leave until almost dawn. She sat at that piano for hours, just pressing keys, listening, feeling. She did not know what she was doing. She had no idea how to play, but something in her had woken up, and it would not let her go. From that night on, Elena had a secret. Every night after her cleaning work was done, she would sit at the lobby piano and teach herself to play. She found videos on her phone, old tutorials and lessons meant for beginners. She watched them over and over, squinting at the small, cracked screen, trying to understand how the fingers were supposed to move. She went to the public library on her days off and checked out books about music theory. Many of the words were difficult for her. Her English was still not perfect, but she studied anyway, taking notes in a little notebook, practicing the shapes of chords and scales in her mind, while she scrubbed floors during the day. Her fingers were not like the fingers of trained pianists. They were thick and calloused from years of hard work. They did not move smoothly at first, but slowly, night after night, week after week, they began to learn. They began to remember where to go. The notes started to come together. Random sounds became melodies. Melodies became songs. 3 years passed like this. 3 years of secret practice between midnight and dawn. 3 years of learning alone, with no teacher, no guide, no one to tell her if she was doing it right or wrong. 3 years of believing in something that no one else could see. Elena never told anyone what she was doing. Not her co-workers. Not her family back home. She was afraid they would laugh. She was afraid they would tell her she was being foolish. A cleaning woman who wanted to play piano? At her age? With no training? It was ridiculous. It was impossible. But every night, when she sat at that piano in the empty lobby, it did not feel impossible. It felt like the truest thing she had ever done. Then one day, she saw something that made her hands tremble. There was a flyer on the notice board at the concert hall. The Hartwell Conservatory, one of the most famous music schools in the country, was holding open auditions for a summer master class. The class would be taught by a man named Victor Anderson, a legendary conductor and pianist who had performed for presidents and kings. He was known for being brilliant and demanding. Students came from all over the world just for the chance to learn from him. The auditions were open to anyone who dared to try. Elena stared at that flyer for a long time. Her mind told her she was crazy. She had no formal training. She had never performed for anyone. She was just a cleaning woman who played alone in an empty lobby in the middle of the night. But her heart told her something different. Her heart told her that this was what all those nights had been leading to. This was the door she had been walking toward. Even if she had not known it, with shaking hands, she took out her phone. She recorded herself playing at the lobby piano late that night, a piece by Chopin that she had taught herself note by note. Her recording was not perfect. The sound quality was poor. But she sent it anyway. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at her small apartment. She had been accepted, and that was when the real journey began. Elena read the acceptance letter 7 times before she believed it was real. She held it in her hands and cried, standing alone in her tiny apartment with the peeling wallpaper and the window that looked out on a brick wall. She had done it. Someone had listened to her recording and decided she was worth a chance. For the next few weeks, she worked extra shifts to save money. She would need to take time off for the masterclass, and she could not afford to fall behind on rent or the money she sent home to her mother. She cleaned more offices, more bathrooms, more floors. Her body was exhausted, but her spirit was alive in a way it had never been before. The night before the masterclass began, Elena laid out her clothes on her bed. She did not have much to choose from. Most of what she owned was practical, meant for work, but at the bottom of her small closet, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dress her mother had sewn for her years ago. It was simple, made of light blue cotton with small white flowers along the hem. Her mother had made it for Elena's birthday, back when Elena still lived in the village. It was the nicest thing she owned. She ironed it carefully, removing every wrinkle. She polished her only pair of nice shoes, black flats that were a little scuffed but still decent. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror above her dresser and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Hartwell Conservatory was even more beautiful than the concert hall where Elena worked. It was an old building made of stone, with tall windows and heavy wooden doors. Inside, the floors were polished marble. The walls were covered with paintings of famous composers and photographs of legendary musicians who had studied there. Everything about the place whispered of history and importance, and a world Elena had only ever watched from the outside. She arrived early, clutching her bag against her chest like a shield. Other students were already there. gathered in small groups, talking and laughing like they had known each other for years. Maybe some of them had. This was their world. They belonged here. Elena did not belong here. She felt it the moment she walked through the door. The other students were young, most of them in their early 20s. They wore expensive clothes, the kind Elena saw in shop windows she would never enter. Their bags had fancy labels. Their shoes looked like they had never touched a dirty floor. They carried themselves with a confidence that came from a lifetime of being told they were special, talented, destined for greatness. Elena stood near the wall and watched them. She heard pieces of their conversations. One young woman talked about her summer in Vienna, studying with a famous teacher. A young man mentioned his performance at a competition in London. Another spoke casually about the grand piano in his family's vacation home. As if everyone had such things. They had all been training since they were children. They had gone to the best schools. They had teachers whose names Elena had seen in her library books. They had spent their whole lives preparing for moments like this. Elena had spent the last 3 years playing alone in an empty lobby after midnight. The difference was so big, it almost made her turn around and leave. What was she thinking? How could she possibly belong here? She was a cleaning woman. She did not have a single lesson to her name. She had learned everything from YouTube videos and borrowed library books. These people would see right through her. They would know she did not deserve to be here. But then she thought about all those nights at the piano. All those hours of practice when her fingers ached and her eyes burned from tiredness. All those moments when she wanted to give up but did not. She had come too far to run away now. She found a seat in the back of the room and waited. The welcome session began with introductions. One by one, the students stood up and shared their backgrounds, where they had studied, who had taught them, what competitions they had won. The list of accomplishments was endless. Royal Academy of Music, Juilliard, Moscow Conservatory, Paris, Berlin. Names of famous teachers rolled off their tongues like casual conversation. Elena felt her stomach tighten with each introduction. When her turn came, she stood up slowly. The room turned to look at her, this older woman in a simple cotton dress among all their designer outfits. She cleared her throat. Her English was good now, but her accent was still strong. She knew they could hear where she came from, with every word she spoke. "My name is Elena Vasquez," she said. "I am from Mexico. I work as a cleaning woman here in Chicago. I have never had a formal piano lesson. I taught myself to play 3 years ago, at night, on the piano, in the lobby of the concert hall where I work." Silence. Then, slowly, she heard it. A small laugh from somewhere in the middle of the room. Then another. Someone whispered something, and more quiet laughter followed. Elena saw the looks on their faces. Confusion, amusement, disbelief. A few of them did not even try to hide their smirks. One young man in the front row, a tall student with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch, turned to the person beside him and said something under his breath. The other student covered his mouth to hide a laugh. But Elena heard part of it anyway. Must be some kind of mistake. Elena sat down. Her face was burning. Her hands were trembling in her lap. She stared at the floor and tried to breathe. The session continued, but Elena barely heard any of it. She was too busy fighting the voice in her head that told her she should leave. That she did not belong. That everyone in this room knew it. Later that day, she saw Maestro Victor Anderson for the first time. He was an older man, tall and thin, with white hair swept back from his forehead and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. He walked into the room, and everyone fell silent. There was something about him, a presence, an authority, that made people pay attention without him saying a single word. He had conducted the greatest orchestras in the world. He had played piano for presidents and kings. His recordings were considered masterpieces. Students would travel across oceans, just for the chance to learn from him for a single week. He stood at the front of the room and looked at each student in turn. When his eyes reached Elena, they paused for just a moment. She could not read his expression. It was not unkind, but it was not warm either. It was simply observing. Measuring. Music, he said, his voice deep and accented, is not about perfection. It is about truth. I am not here to teach you how to play correctly. I am here to see if you have anything real to say. He let those words hang in the air. Many of you have trained your whole lives. You have technique. You have knowledge. But technique without soul is just noise. This week, I will be looking for the ones who have something more. His eyes swept the room again. Elena felt her heart pounding. Do not try to impress me, he said. Try to move me. That is much harder. The first group sessions began the next morning. One by one, students were asked to play. Elena watched as they performed pieces by Beethoven, Chopin, Liszt. Their fingers flew across the keys with speed and precision. Every note was clean. Every phrase was polished. The other students nodded approvingly. The instructors made notes on their clipboards. When it was Elena's turn, she walked to the piano with her head held high, even though her knees were shaking. She sat down and played a simple nocturne, one she had practiced hundreds of times in that empty lobby. Her fingering was different. Her style was not what they had learned in their textbooks. She saw the instructors exchange glances. One of them made a note and frowned slightly. Interesting approach, an instructor said when she finished. The word interesting did not sound like a compliment. The tall young man from the front row caught her eye as she returned to her seat. He was smiling, but not in a kind way. Don't worry, he said, loud enough for others to hear. Not everyone is meant for this. Some people are meant to clean the halls. Others are meant to fill them. A few students laughed. Others looked away, embarrassed but unwilling to speak up. Elena said nothing. She sat down and folded her hands in her lap. Her eyes burned, but she did not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. That night, she stayed in the practice room long after everyone else had gone. She played until her fingers ached, until the sky outside turned from black to gray. She would show them. She would show them all. The first week of the masterclass was the hardest week of Elena's life. Harder than leaving her village. Harder than those first cold months alone in Chicago. Harder than all those nights of teaching herself to play while the rest of the world slept. Every day brought new challenges. Every session revealed how different she was from the other students. They played with a technique that had been shaped by years of professional instruction. Their hands moved in ways they had been taught since childhood. They knew the rules, the traditions, the proper way to interpret every piece. Elena played the way she felt. And apparently, that was not good enough. The instructors were not cruel, but they were honest. They pointed out her unconventional fingering. They noted that her posture was not quite right. They commented on her timing, her dynamics, her phrasing. Everything she had taught herself in that empty lobby was being picked apart, examined, and found lacking. Your technique is unorthodox, one instructor told her after a practice session. He was an older man with kind eyes, and Elena could tell he was trying to be gentle. You have passion, that is clear. But passion, without proper foundation, can only take you so far. Perhaps you might consider starting with more basic studies before attempting pieces of this difficulty. Elena nodded and thanked him. She did not tell him that she had no money for basic studies. She did not tell him that the lobby piano was her only classroom. She just smiled and said she would work harder. But working harder did not stop the whispers. She heard them everywhere. In the hallways, in the practice rooms, in the dining area where students gathered between sessions. They thought she could not hear. Or maybe they did not care if she did. Can you believe she actually got accepted? I heard she cleans toilets for a living. It must be some kind of charity case, a diversity thing. She's wasting everyone's time. She should just go home. The tall young man from the first day was the worst. He never missed a chance to remind Elena that she did not belong. He would make comments during group sessions, little remarks that sounded almost innocent but cut like knives. He would sigh loudly when she played, or shake his head with a pitying smile. He made sure everyone knew what he thought of her. One afternoon, during a break between sessions, something happened that nearly broke her. Elena had been assigned to practice in one of the smaller rooms. She was working on a piece by Chopin. The Ballade No. 1. A beautiful and complicated work that she had spent months learning on her own. It was the piece she planned to play at the final showcase. She knew every note by heart. She had poured her soul into it during all those lonely nights. When she returned from getting a glass of water, she found the tall young man sitting at her piano. A small crowd of students had gathered around him, watching with amused expressions. He looked up when she entered and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "I thought I would show everyone how this piece is actually supposed to sound," he said. "You know, for educational purposes." And then he began to play. His fingers moved across the keys with perfect precision. Every note was clean. Every phrase was exactly as the textbooks described. He played the entire first section of the ballade, the same section Elena had been practicing. And he made it look effortless. The students around him nodded appreciatively. Someone even clapped softly. When he finished, he stood up and looked directly at Elena. "See," he said. "That is how a real pianist plays Chopin. Some people are born for the stage. Others are born for the mop and bucket. There is no shame in knowing your place." The room was silent. A few students looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. No one defended her. Elena stood in the doorway, her glass of water still in her hand, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him that he knew nothing about her journey, about what it had taken for her to be standing in that room. She wanted to throw that glass of water in his smug, perfect face. But she did none of those things. Instead, she thought of her grandmother. Her grandmother had been a small woman with hands that were always busy and eyes that always smiled. She had lived through things that would have broken most people. Poverty, loss, struggles that Elena only learned about later, when she was old enough to understand. But her grandmother never complained. She never gave up. She just kept going, one day at a time, with a quiet strength that Elena had always admired. One evening, when Elena was young, she had come home crying because some children in the village had made fun of her torn dress. Her grandmother had held her close and wiped her tears, and then she had said something that Elena never forgot. "The river does not stop because the stones mock its path. It flows around them, it flows over them, and in time, it wears them down to nothing. Be like the river, mija. Keep flowing." Standing in that doorway, with everyone watching her, Elena heard those words again. They rose up from somewhere deep inside her, from a place where her grandmother's love still lived. She took a breath. She unclenched her fists, and she walked into the room with her head held high. "Thank you for the demonstration," she said to the tall young man. Her voice was calm, even though her hands were shaking. "I will keep practicing." 2. She sat down at the piano. She placed her fingers on the keys, and she began to play. Her version was different from his. It did not have the same technical polish, but it had something else. It had feeling. It had truth. It had every ounce of pain and hope and determination that she had carried with her from that small village to this grand conservatory. She did not play for the students watching her. She did not play to prove anything to the tall young man. She played for herself. She played for her grandmother. She played for every person who had ever been told they were not good enough. When she finished, no one clapped. No one said anything. The tall young man had a strange look on his face. Something that might have been confusion or discomfort or maybe even a tiny flicker of doubt. The other students drifted away quietly, not meeting her eyes. Elena did not care. She had done what she needed to do. She had refused to be broken. That night, she stayed in the practice room until the sky began to lighten. Her fingers ached. Her back was sore from sitting so long, but she did not stop. She played the ballade over and over, each time finding something new in it, each time pouring more of herself into the music. Tomorrow was the final showcase. Every student would perform in front of Maestro Anderson and a panel of judges. It was the moment everything had been building toward, the moment that would decide whether Elena's journey ended here or continued on to something greater. She thought about withdrawing. She thought about saving herself the embarrassment of performing in front of all those people who had already decided she did not belong. She thought about going back to her cleaning job and pretending this whole thing had never happened. But then she thought about the river. She thought about the stones. She thought about her grandmother's voice, soft and steady, telling her to keep flowing. Elena closed her eyes and made her decision. She would play tomorrow. She would stand on that stage in her simple cotton dress, with her work-worn hands and her self-taught technique, and she would show them what 3 years of midnight practice had created. They could laugh, they could whisper, they could doubt her all they wanted, but they would have to listen. The morning of the final showcase arrived gray and quiet. Elena woke before dawn, her body stiff from another night of practice. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the other students. She heard their whispers. She felt the weight of everything that was about to happen. She got dressed slowly, putting on her mother's cotton dress one more time. She looked at herself in the small mirror in her room. The dress was simple. Her shoes were old. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning. She did not look like the other students. She never would. But she was here. She had made it this far. And today, she would play. The showcase was held in the main concert hall of the conservatory, a grand room with high ceilings and hundreds of velvet seats. Elena remembered cleaning a room just like this one, mopping the floors while imagining what it would feel like to sit on that stage. Now she was about to find out. She arrived early and found a seat in the back. Other students filtered in slowly, dressed in their finest clothes. The women wore elegant dresses in deep colors. The men wore suits that fit perfectly. They looked like they belonged on magazine covers. They looked like real musicians. Elena pulled her simple dress tighter around herself and tried to breathe. The judges sat in the front row. There were 5 of them, all respected figures in the classical music world. But the one everyone was watching was Maestro Victor Anderson. He sat in the center, his white hair combed back, his sharp eyes taking in everything. His face showed no emotion. No one could tell what he was thinking. The showcase began. One by one, students walked to the stage and performed. Each one was brilliant in their own way. Their fingers danced across the keys with speed and precision. They played Beethoven, and Liszt, and Rachmaninoff. They played pieces so difficult that Elena could not even imagine attempting them. Every performance was met with polite applause and approving nods from the judges. Elena watched and listened. She saw the tall young man perform a fiery piece by Liszt, his hands moving so fast they were almost a blur. When he finished, he stood and gave a small bow, looking pleased with himself. Several people in the audience clapped loudly. He caught Elena's eye on his way back to his seat and gave her a small smile. It was not a kind smile. The hours passed. The seats emptied and filled again as students performed their pieces and returned to the audience. Some looked relieved. Others looked nervous about how they had done. The judges wrote notes on their clipboards after each performance, their faces giving nothing away. Elena's name was last on the list. As the second-to-last student finished playing, Elena felt her heart begin to race. Her palms were sweating. Her mouth was dry. She thought about all the things that could go wrong. She thought about her unconventional technique, her lack of formal training, all the things the instructors had criticized during the week. She thought about running, but then she looked at her hands. Those rough, calloused hands that had scrubbed floors and washed dishes and wiped down countless surfaces. Those same hands had also learned to create music. They had taught themselves something beautiful in the quiet hours when no one was watching. They had worked harder than anyone in this room could understand. Those hands deserved a chance to be heard. When her name was called, Elena stood. The room seemed very quiet. She felt everyone's eyes on her as she walked down the aisle toward the stage. Her shoes made soft sounds on the polished floor. Her simple dress moved gently as she walked. She kept her eyes forward, afraid that if she looked at anyone, she might lose her nerve. She reached the piano and sat down on the bench. The instrument was beautiful, a grand piano with a shiny black surface that reflected the stage lights. It was so different from the lobby piano where she had taught herself to play. But the keys were the same. The music would be the same. This was just another piano, Another moment. Another chance to speak without words. Elena placed her fingers on the keys. They were trembling. She looked out at the audience. Hundreds of faces looked back at her. The judges sat with their clipboards ready. Maestro Anderson watched her with those sharp, unreadable eyes. The tall young man sat with his arms crossed, a look of amusement on his face. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about her village. She thought about the dirt roads and the sound of her grandmother humming while she cooked. She thought about leaving everything behind and coming to a strange country where she knew no one. She thought about the first time she pressed a key on that lobby piano, how the note had rung out in the empty hall and awakened something inside her that had been sleeping her whole life. She thought about all those nights of practice, the aching fingers, the burning eyes, the moments of doubt and frustration and wanting to give up. She thought about the whispers and the laughter and the cruelty of people who thought they were better than her, and then she stopped thinking. She began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 floated out into the hall, soft and gentle, like a question being asked. Elena did not play the way the textbook said to play. She did not follow the rules that had been drilled into the other students since childhood. She played the way she felt the music. She played the way it lived inside her. The melody grew stronger, fuller. Her fingers moved across the keys, not with perfect technique but with something else entirely. Purpose. Emotion. Truth. Every note carried a piece of her story, the poverty she had come from, the dreams she had carried in secret, the loneliness of those midnight hours in the empty lobby, the pain of being mocked and dismissed and told she did not belong. The music swelled and dipped, sometimes thundering with power, sometimes whispering with tenderness. Elena poured everything into it. All her joy and sorrow, all her fear and hope, all the love she carried for her grandmother and her mother and the village she had left behind. She held nothing back. Something began to shift in the room. The polite attention that audiences usually give became something deeper. People leaned forward in their seats. Whispers faded to nothing. Even the judges stopped writing on their clipboards and simply listened. Elena did not notice. She was somewhere else now. Somewhere the music had taken her. She was back in her grandmother's kitchen. Listening to her hum, she was standing in front of the lobby piano for the first time, pressing that single key. She was every cleaning woman and field worker and invisible person who had ever dared to dream of something more. The final section of the ballade arrived, a cascade of notes that demanded everything a pianist could give. Elena's hands flew across the keys, not with the polished speed of the other students, but with a raw power that came from somewhere beyond technique. Her unconventional fingering, the thing the instructors had criticized, gave her playing a unique texture. It was imperfect. It was different. It was completely and unmistakably hers. The final chord rang out through the hall and slowly faded into silence. Elena sat still, her hands resting on the keys, her eyes still closed. She was breathing hard. Her fingers ached. She had given everything she had. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the tall young man. The amused smile was gone from his face. In its place was something she had never expected to see. Confusion. Uncertainty. Maybe even a tiny hint of respect. She looked at the audience. Many people were wiping their eyes. A woman in the third row was crying openly. Even some of the other students looked shaken. Their expressions no longer smug or dismissive, but something else. Something humbled. And then she looked at Maestro Victor Anderson. The old maestro was not writing on his clipboard. He was not whispering to the other judges. He was simply sitting there, staring at Elena with an expression she could not quite read. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. The room held its breath. Maestro Victor Anderson stood slowly, like a man who had just witnessed something that required him to rise. The other judges looked at him with surprise. In all the years they had worked with him, they had never seen him do this. He was known for staying seated, for giving his verdict with calm authority, for never showing more emotion than a slight nod or a brief word of praise. But now he was standing, and he was walking toward the stage. The room was completely silent. No one moved. No one whispered. Every person in that hall understood that something unusual was happening. Something that had never happened before in the history of this master class. Elena sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. She watched the old maestro approach, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. She did not know what was coming. She braced herself for criticism, for disappointment, for the final confirmation that she did not belong in this world. Maestro Anderson climbed the steps to the stage. He walked slowly, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When he reached the piano, he stopped and looked at Elena for a long moment. His sharp eyes, which had seemed so cold and unreadable before, now held something different. Something warm. Then he turned to face the audience. "I have spent 60 years in music," he said. His voice was deep and carried easily through the hall, even though he was not speaking loudly. "I have trained prodigies at the finest conservatories in the world. I have conducted orchestras in Vienna, Berlin, New York. I have played piano for presidents and kings, and audiences of thousands. I have heard more performances than I can count." He paused and looked back at Elena. "And in all that time," he continued, "I have been searching for something. Something that cannot be taught. Something that no amount of training or practice can create. I have been searching for truth." The audience listened in complete stillness. "Many of you played beautifully today," he said, addressing the students. "Your technique was impressive. Your training was evident. You have learned well from your teachers. But technique without soul is just noise. Perfect notes without meaning are just sounds. Music is not about playing correctly. It is about saying something real." He turned back to Elena. "This woman," he said, "has just given us something that conservatories rarely produce. She has given us truth. Not perfection. Truth. And truth is worth more than all the technique in the world." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. She blinked hard, trying to hold them back. Maestro Anderson looked at her with a gentle expression, softer than she had ever seen from him. "Where did you study?" he asked. Elena's voice was quiet, but in the silent hall, everyone could hear her. "A concert hall lobby," she said. A murmur rippled through the audience. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others wiped their eyes. The maestro nodded slowly, as if this answer explained everything. "Then that lobby," he said, "has produced something that many of the greatest music schools in the world have failed to create. A real musician." He reached out and took Elena's hand. Her rough, calloused hand that had scrubbed floors and washed dishes, and taught itself to create beauty in the silence between midnight and dawn. He held it gently, like it was something precious. "I would like to offer you a full scholarship," he said, "to study under me personally, to develop your gift and share it with the world, if you are willing." Elena could not speak. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled down her cheeks. She nodded, unable to find words for what she was feeling. And then something happened that she would remember for the rest of her life. Someone in the audience started to clap. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was filled with applause. People rose to their feet, one by one, until everyone was standing. The sound washed over Elena like a wave, filling her with a warmth she had never known. She looked out at the audience through her tears. She saw the woman in the third row still crying. She saw the other students clapping, some of them looking at her with new eyes. She saw the tall young man, the one who had mocked her, who had told her she was meant for the mop and bucket. He was standing too. He was clapping, and on his face was an expression she never thought she would see there. Shame. Regret. Maybe even the beginning of understanding. Elena did not feel anger toward him. She did not feel the need for revenge or satisfaction. She just felt grateful. Grateful that she had kept going. Grateful that she had refused to give up. Grateful that her grandmother's words had carried her through the darkest moments. The river had flowed around the stones. The river had flowed over them. And now the river was free. The months that followed changed everything for Elena. She studied under Maestro Anderson, learning things she had never known, refining her gift while keeping the raw honesty that made her playing special. She performed in small concerts at first, then larger ones. Word spread about the cleaning woman who had stunned the maestro. People wanted to hear her story. More importantly, they wanted to hear her play. Within 2 years, Elena was performing on stages around the world. She played in Paris and London and Tokyo and New York. She played in the very concert hall where she had once mopped the floors. When she walked onto that stage, she thought about all those nights alone with the lobby piano, and she smiled. But Elena never forgot where she came from. Before every concert, she made a point to find the cleaning staff. The janitors, the maintenance workers, the people who emptied trash cans and wiped down seats after everyone else had gone. She would introduce herself, learn their names, shake their hands. Sometimes, she would sit with them in the break room and share a cup of coffee. "You belong here too," she would tell them. "Never let anyone make you think otherwise." Some of them recognized her story. Some of them had seen articles about her or watched videos of her performances. They would look at her with wonder, unable to believe that someone like them had made it to the stage. "If I can do it," Elena would say, "anyone can. You just have to keep going, even when it hurts, even when they laugh. You keep going." She sent money home to her mother every month, more than she ever could have imagined. She paid to have her grandmother's old house repaired, even though her grandmother was long gone. She started a scholarship fund for young musicians who could not afford lessons, children from poor families who had talent but no opportunity. She gave back everything she could. Years later, when a journalist asked her about that day at the masterclass, about what it felt like when Maestro Anderson stood up and walked toward her, Elena was quiet for a moment. "I thought he was going to tell me to leave," she said finally. "I thought he was going to say I did not belong there, that I had wasted everyone's time." "What did you learn from that moment?" the journalist asked. Elena smiled. It was the same smile her grandmother used to have, warm and full of knowing. "I learned that the people who laugh at you do not get to decide your future," she said. "I learned that where you start does not determine where you end. And I learned that the most powerful music does not come from perfect technique or expensive training. It comes from having something true to say, something real, something that only you can give." She looked down at her hands. They were still rough in places, still marked by years of hard work. But now, they were also famous. They had played for audiences around the world. They had moved people to tears and to joy and to standing ovations that lasted for minutes. "My grandmother used to say that the river does not stop for the stones," Elena said. "It flows around them, over them, through them, and eventually, it reaches the sea." She looked up at the journalist with eyes that had seen struggle and triumph, and everything in between. "I am still flowing," she said, "and I will never stop."